So after a conversation with a friend of mine, Clint, on the phone, so I had a conversation with my friend Clint on the phone a few minutes ago, and we were talking about being offended, which is a pretty common word thrown around in the, I guess, the cultural vernacular these days. Everybody seems to be offended by something. And so we're sort of kind of defining for ourselves what we felt like it meant to be offended. What does being offended really mean? And we came to the conclusion that there's really nothing that a person could say to me that I would find offense in or with. It's hard to offend me. And he came to the same conclusion about himself, that there's not a lot of things someone could say to me, really nothing I could think of, honestly, off the top of my head, that would offend me. Now, there's things that might hurt my feelings or make me angry or annoy me or frustrate me, but those words are not really synonymous with offense. So we got to thinking about it, and we tried to, what are the prerequisites for being offended? And obviously these are just, this is the term according to our definition, but trying to illuminate the disparity between a word like offended and frustrated and hurt or whatever. What does offended really mean? And what has to exist as a prerequisite for offense to happen verbally? And one of the first things that we came to the conclusion with was that there has to be a shred of truth, at least in your perspective, to what the other person is saying. So an example Clint used is that if he were to call me fat, I would not be offended. Now, am I in perfect shape? No. But am I fat? No. Okay, so it would not offend me if someone called me fat, even if I really thought they thought I was fat, because I know that I'm not. I don't believe that I am fat. There's no truth in that descriptor from my perspective, so it doesn't have the power to offend me. So let's think about something that would be a negative about me that's true, and that would be that I'm forgetful. I'm a forgetful person. If I forget where things are. If I put something down in a place that I don't normally keep it, I tend to lose it every time. So that would be something that's true, that's a negative, something I don't like about myself. I don't like that I'm as forgetful as I am. But if you called me forgetful, I would not be offended by that. So it can't be just that there's a shred of truth about something negative for there to be offense. So we have to dig deeper. What else has to be true? It would have to be something that, well, I'd have to be aware of it, for one. If you told me something that I wasn't aware of, I think it would be hard for me to be offended by it, because it would go right back to me believing that it's not true. So I have to be aware of it. It has to be true and negative. And it would have to be something that played on insecurity. It has to be something that I don't want to hear. I know that I'm forgetful. I expect that other people that are close to me are going to be aware that I'm forgetful. So it doesn't play on any... I have no insecurity about my forgetfulness. I've come to terms with that. Doesn't mean that I don't try to work on it or make it better, but I've come to terms with my forgetfulness, so it doesn't offend me for someone to point that out. So now we have a few things. It has to be negative. It has to be something we're aware of. It has to be something that we believe is true, and it has to be something that we're insecure about. And I think there's another element involved. I think it also has to be that whoever is saying the offensive thing, we must have to believe that they don't have the right or rank, and I guess those things could be synonymous, to point it out. And the example I used with Clint was, okay, well, I feel like it's sort of what's the word I'm thinking of? A social norm. I mean, the word's escaping me, but it's irrelevant. I can make the point without the word I'm thinking of, or trying to think of. A fat person can call another person fat, but a skinny person is not supposed to call a fat person fat. It's more offensive if a skinny person points out someone else is fat than it is if a fellow fat person does. And so why is that? Because I guess they would feel like the skinny person doesn't struggle with that, so they don't have the right to point it out. Maybe, I guess. I mean, so and so you start, if you work with this definition, you start to think about the things that people as individuals or groups of people that identify themselves by the collective. Identity politics is very woven into the proliferation of offense in our culture and our society. It's all about, it's not just about that people are pointing out a negative thing, but they're pointing out a negative thing that someone possesses some sort of mental or emotional weakness about, an insecurity about, and that they don't feel like the other person has the cultural right to point it out. So there might be things that one race could say about members of that same race that someone from another race would be offensive if they said it. And so if we apply all the tenets of the definition, let's say if somebody called me a cracker, I would not be offended by that, because what does the word cracker mean to me? Nothing, really. I mean, what emotions does that evoke? What stereotype does being a cracker mean? I mean, the word cracker means plain, like a saltine cracker. It's a square. Used to, a square would be a slang for somebody who's boring or unimaginative, doesn't have a cultural base or whatever. Someone who's just sort of, plain Jane and milquetoast, vanilla. That's what cracker is supposed to mean, is that you're plain. A plain white, boring person. I know that doesn't apply to me. That is not a good descriptor of who I am as an individual. So it holds no power over me. I can't be offended by something that's powerless. So, I think it's interesting if you think about it, and I could go into a million different examples, but it would probably offend people that saw this. So rather than me do that, why don't you do that yourself? Think about the things that people take offense to. They claim that are offensive, and start applying those tenets of the definition. Is there truth in the word or the phrase that's being used? From their own perspective, I would hold that there has to be. They have to believe that there's a shred of truth to whatever's being said for it to be offensive. And it has to be something that they don't want to hear, that they're insecure about what they believe to be the truth in the statement. And they must feel like you don't have the right to point it out based on their worldview, their beholdingness to identity politics or the group collective, or even as an individual. Can redheaded people joke about being a ginger, but it's offensive if a blonde does the same thing? And I think it's kind of telling that really I feel like a person has to believe what the other person is saying to find offense in it. If I'm upset about somebody, let's say somebody called me a cracker, I wouldn't be offended by it. But if they did it sincerely, like if I knew that they meant offense by it, I might find the audacity in that they said it frustrating or maybe even angering. Like I might be angered by the fact that someone would have the audacity to intend offense to me. But that's a very different thing. And if you think about it, if I'm angry about something, where's the focal point of that emotion? It's on the other person. I'm angry about what they did. But if I'm offended by something, I'm offended by what I feel, what I believe to be the truth hidden in the statement. And I think that's pretty telling. There's an inherent, in my opinion, emotional and mental weakness that must be present for offense. I have to feel that the phrase itself or the truth embedded in it has some power over me that I am incapable of overcoming. If I, as a person who's not fat, called another person fat and they were offended by it, it would most likely be, in my hypothesis, that not only do they know they're fat and they don't feel like I should be able to point it out because I'm not, but it must also be that they don't feel like they have the ability to fix it. If you told me I had bad breath, I wouldn't be offended by that. I would poll other people that were close enough to me to to find out if do I have bad breath, and if other people corroborate, yes, you do have bad breath. What would I do? I would go see a dentist. I'd make sure there's something I can do about it. I would brush my teeth 3 times a day instead of 2 times a day, and I would take a little travel thing of scope with me, and every once in a while I'd swish it into my mouth. I would fix a problem. It would be a fixable problem. I would chew sugar-free gum all the time. I would still not be offended because I could fix the problem. If you told me, Mark, you could stand to lose 10 pounds, I may find that to be true. And if it was something that was bad enough that I didn't like hearing it, I would simply fix the problem. I would jog a little bit or exercise more or eat better and lose 10 pounds if I didn't want to be confronted with that truth. But maybe if you didn't feel like you were powerful enough to overcome whatever the issue was that made you overweight, if that was the source, I'm just using that as an example for why you might be offended, that same thing that makes you feel powerless to fix the inconvenient truth is probably the same source. That mental or emotional weakness is the same source of the insecurity about that truth in the first place. Those things are connected. People are offended by the things that they don't like, that they believe are true, that they don't think they can fix. Offense isn't about what the person said or about the person who said it. Offense is about what you feel that you can't change, that you don't like. So every time somebody says they're offended by something, on some level, they are agreeing with the something they're offended by.